This is simultaneously a great pleasure to be here at .NET Unboxed talking to you, and a pleasant surprise. I don't know how many of you know a bit of the backstory behind this conference, but David got the idea when he came to .NET Fringe in Portland in April. And he contacted me, I think it was in about June, right, David? And he told me about this cool idea, and I just jumped on it. I thought, this is a great idea. But I thought, can you really pull this off in 4 months? But he's done it, you know, and he's put together a great team, Chelsea, Christy, and Kate, and here we are, and it's happening. So I think that deserves a round of applause. Well done, guys. All right, so who is this guy up here talking to you? Well, my name's Adam, and I come from the UK, as you probably guessed by now. I now live in a country called Switzerland, and there is this stereotype that goes around which says that people from the US can't tell the difference between Switzerland and Sweden. And actually, funnily enough, I was in the cab yesterday on the way from the airport, and the guy said to me, "Where are you from?" I said, "Yeah, I'm from Switzerland. I spend a lot of time in Zurich." And 1 minute later, he said to me, "So Zurich's the capital of Sweden?" So it does happen. But I'm sure that doesn't apply to you guys. You all look like well-informed, well-educated .NET developers. I'm sure you know the difference. And likewise, I know all about Texas. You know, ask me anything about the Houston Cowboys or the Dallas Texans. Two of my favorite baseball teams. And yeah, when I'm not watching the NBA, I spend a lot of time in open source, as David said. And open source is my passion. I absolutely love open source. And I'm going to talk to you a lot about that today. Now, we've got a great speaker lineup over the next 2 days. I'm sure you'll agree. And you're going to hear a lot about some really, really cool open source projects. So I'm going to try and warm you up for that by just talking about open source in general. But before I do that, I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story, actually the one that David mentioned. Something that happened at this event last year in November. Connect, this was an online and live event hosted by Microsoft. And they made a lot of really big announcements here. And I was actually at work at the time, my previous job. And I had this laptop and this phone here tethered to it. And I was watching this out of one eye because I heard a rumor that there were going to be some really cool announcements. So I was watching this out of one eye, and this one in particular caught my eye. This was the open sourcing of the .NET Core framework. Now, this is a pretty big deal, right? This is the .NET framework of the future. You know, it's the portable, cross-platform, modular framework that I think we're all waiting for. And for it to be open source, well, I think that's really cool. So I thought to myself, well, it's on GitHub now. I can clone it, I can fork it, you know, I can do whatever I like with the kind of thing I do with any open source project. So I did exactly that. And I saw in the root folder a build.cmd. So I thought, cool, okay, well, I'll run that. Let's see what happens. So I ran it, and a load of green text flashed past. And then this happened, right? Red text. Red text is never a good sign. And I realize this is very small, but it actually says here that 2 tests failed. Okay, that's a little bit odd. This has just been announced. It's a fresh open source project, like millions or however many developers listening to this worldwide. Why is this failing? Surely this can't be right. So I had a closer look, and this was the problem. A couple of tests, Vector 2 and Vector 3. And they were expecting dollars. They were actually getting CHF. CHF is the international symbol for Swiss francs. That's a bit suspect because my machine is a Swiss-German machine. Right? So I think I was probably the first person outside Redmond to run build.cmd, or at least outside the US. So I looked into it a bit more in a bit more detail, and sure enough, it's very obvious why this failed. Right? So these lines up here, they are saying format the vector with a currency to a currency, and use the US English format. So obviously that's going to be dollars, right? That's the US English currency symbol. Then it says format it with no specific culture. So what's it going to do? It's going to use the culture of the machine, right? My machine's not US English, it's Swiss German. So it's obviously not going to be dollars. Sorry? Okay. Same thing for vector 3, it's just a 3D vector. Vector 4 did not fail. Anyone see why? It is using the wrong variable, yeah. It's using the one from up here. It should be using this one. So a flaw test which passes by virtue of its flaw. And I thought, well, you know, I know this stuff. I can fix this. This looks pretty easy to fix. So I went ahead and did that, and I fixed vector 2. Did a very obvious thing. I just formatted the two numbers using. I think this is running out of battery, which is not. Using the currency symbol, and that is obviously going to use the currency symbol from my machine's locale. So this is going to work. Same thing for vector 3. I am a bit of a style cop obsessive, and fellow connoisseurs will have noticed I put in an extra line break here. And the reason I did that was because I was getting quite excited at this point. It's a bit embarrassing for me, an extra line break. But I got quite excited because I thought, if I pull request this now, this might be the first ever pull request to the .NET framework ever. So I started to get a bit, and I guess that's why this extra line break creeped in. And I did that. I sent the pull request and I tweeted it. And this went fairly viral fairly quickly. It got a few retweets, and a lot of people went over to the pull request and started to chime in. And this is actually the pull request itself. It's just a recording of me browsing to it. I'll just skip forward a bit. But it did get merged, as you can see. And all kinds of people started chiming in on this. The word spread very quickly. And this is all very exciting. And as I said, I was at work at this time, and my phone was just sitting on my desk buzzing continuously. And all my colleagues hated it, but I thought it was really cool. It was really exciting. And yeah, this went on and on and on, and all kinds of people chiming in. And I won't play the whole thing because it takes ages. But do go and have a look at the thread. It's quite amusing. There's a lot of funny stuff in there. So that's great. Now, later on in an interview, Scott Hanselman revealed that there was in fact a plan. And the plan was that Scott and Miguel de Casa from Xamarin would get up on stage, and Miguel would send the first ever PR. And I kind of ruined that. Right? I guess the guy who merged the PR didn't get the memo either. Right? And I think this was actually the moment it was supposed to happen. Again, I apologize for the resolution there. It's terrible. This is actually scraped out of a tweet. But this says, Adam Ralph authored an hour ago, and I don't think Miguel looks too happy about it. Yeah. So yeah, guys, I am really sorry. If you happen to be watching a recording of this, I am really sorry for that. However, Scott did get his own back. I don't know if you noticed, but I wrote, this fixes the failure on my DECH machine. DECH means Swiss German. Scott somehow interpreted that as being Czechoslovakia. And he said, oh yeah, you know, this guy came along minutes after the announcement, sent this PR, Adam Ralph, I think he's from Czechoslovakia. And from that moment on, I became known as that Czechoslovakian guy. Right? And I still have one friend who still calls me this. Seriously. You never told us. Yeah, well, I tried to keep it quiet, but yeah, some people still know this. Well, you guys will know this now. And so good on you, Scott, for getting me back. Shame on you, because Czechoslovakia doesn't even begin with CH, and it's not even a country anymore. You know? But anyway, that was a lot of fun. And after that, my work day settled back to normal, and Lundberg came over and asked me for my cover sheets and my TPS reports. Who gets that? All right, fist bump. The rest of you should watch Office Space. It's an awesome movie. So, open source. What is open source? Anyone tell me what open source is? Can you sum it up? Yeah.
Open source is a project that anyone in the community can contribute to in one form or another by forking and making code changes and submitting it upstream for pull requests.
Right. That's a very good answer. So the essence is that anyone in the community can contribute. Okay. It's more than just having your code available. So I think to find out more about what it is, it's interesting to look at the history. And I'm going to do this from three different aspects. I'm going to talk about the community, the whole open source community as it exists. I'm going to pick out a couple of members of the community, in particular Microsoft. Okay, pretty relevant for us here at .NET Unboxed. because I think Microsoft's journey through open source is really interesting. I think it's a really interesting thing to look at. And I'm going to talk about me, right? So I'm just going to show off and say how great I am. No, not really. If I was going to do that, I'd dress up as Snoop Dogg or something. No, what I'm going to do is talk about my journey in open source, because it's done a lot for me, and I've really, really enjoyed it, and I want to share that with you. And I think it can do a lot for everyone. So we can actually trace the history of open source all the way back to the 60s. I'm sure most of you have heard of MIT. In MIT, a group of guys started to do some work. Well, they started to play with computers, and they invented the thing called hacking. Right? And it was particularly around a couple of places like the Tech Model Railroad Club and the AI Lab at MIT. And it wasn't just MIT, it was Carnegie Mellon, Stanford, and a few other places. And they mainly played with this. Right, this is a famous mainframe, the PDB-10. Has anyone ever seen one of these? Glenn, no way. Really?
Yeah, I had a stepbrother who actually worked on, he worked on the PDB-11.
The PDB-11, right. Yeah, so actually we're the same age, so I've seen one too. So we're the old guys. Because I think my dad used one at work, but I'm not sure if it was a 10 or 11 either. But anyway, these guys did some pretty crazy stuff with these things. For instance, at the AI Lab, they weren't happy with the OS that came with it, so they just wrote their own one. Right, the incompatible time-sharing system. And they hooked these things up over the ARPANET, which was the predecessor to the internet, and started to communicate with each other. And slowly this kind of movement coalesced. And in 1975, it got its first ever kind of semi-official definition. A guy called Raphael Finkel put an entry into a thing called the jargon file, which was a file of, it was a glossary of terms that these guys had made up. And this is the year that Hacker got its entry into the jargon file. And the definition that Raphael gave was a person who enjoys exploring the details of programmable systems and how to stretch their capabilities, as opposed to most users who prefer to learn only the minimum necessary. So remember those words, because I will call back to them in the rest of the talk. And incidentally, this was the year that Microsoft was formed. Oh, sorry, I forgot I wrote this. Does anyone know what this is? Yeah, a few of you, yeah. I apologize for this, but I grew up watching Dallas in the UK, and I thought that's what Dallas was like, you know. And this was a huge thing in the UK. People walked around with T-shirts with this written, and I couldn't resist the temptation to stand up in front of a crowd in Dallas and say, "Who shot JR?" My mum would be very proud of me. Anyway, so 1983 is actually the year that I come into this story. And this is the year that I got my first ever computer. Anyone recognize this? No, I'm not surprised. I don't think it really made it over here, but it was really big in the UK. And it was called the Acorn Electron. Did anyone else have a computer in these times? Glenn, I knew you would. Yeah, a few of you. What kind of computers did you guys have?
I had a VIC-20.
VIC-20, I remember that.
I had a Timex Sinclair for a second, and a TRS-80 Model 1.
TRS-80, that was called Tandy in the UK. VIC,
Trash 80.
yeah, VIC-20, 3.5K RAM, right?
It was 4K.
Yeah, and terrible basic.
3.77 megahertz.
Yeah, awesome. And terrible basic, really terrible. But this computer had really, really good basic. That was its biggest strength. It was actually the little brother of a computer called the BBC, which is a program to put a computer in every school. So it had a superb basic, and it allowed me to do things like this. Now, in these days, you could buy games on cassette tape, but one of the main ways we used these computers was to type out programs from books or computer magazines. And this is a game that I typed out, or I used to be able to write this out in about 1 minute. That was one of my little tricks. So we used to sit down at a computer at school, and I'd type this out, and we'd play it all lunchtime. This took me hours, right, to reproduce this. I reproduced this from scratch for this presentation. Can anyone tell what kind of game this is? The variable names give it away a bit. I don't know if you can read it so well. It is a car game, yeah. And I can actually run this thing if I just grab it and start up a BBC emulator. And just paste it in, and there we go, right? In all its glory. Look at that. And I tell you what, you know, this This looks stupid, but I spent hours playing this after I played it and wasted a lot of time. And I still haven't got down to 1,000, right? 1,000, this is my goal. And it actually does get a bit more difficult as you go along. These red things get a bit more frequent. And like, should we see if this is the time that I make it? I'm going to go for it. Come on. It seems like it should be easy. I always make it to over 500. I just cannot get further. Come on. All right, this is the time. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Come on. Come on. It will never happen. So tempted to have another go. All right. So that was a lot of fun. But that was not the only thing going on in the world of computing in 1983. Does anyone recognize this guy? Stallman, yes. Yes, that's right. Richard Stallman was one of the original hackers from MIT. And these were the years of the proprietary Unix wars. There were a lot of companies vying for Unix dominance with closed source Unix solutions. And Richard got so fed up with this that he decided to create a free Unix variant, a variant of Unix where the source code is available to be modified for free. And he came up with this idea called GNU. And GNU stands for GNU's not Unix. It's a recursive algorithm. And by 1991, this still hadn't happened. Okay, GNU had achieved a lot. They'd released things like Emacs and other tooling, but the dream of a free Unix has still never happened. However, in 91, something did happen. Who recognizes this guy? Exactly, Linus Torvalds. And he created something called Linux, which I'm sure you've all heard of. Now, the incredible thing about Linux is that Linus had the idea, put the first version online, the first version of the code, and released it all in the same year. Now, GNU had not managed to do this in 8 years. And after this, Linux became dominant. You know, I'm sure not many of you have heard of a lot of the other Unix variants, but you've all heard of Linux, and possibly, you know, your mum and dad might have heard of Linux. It's a pretty much a household name. So why did this happen? Why did Linux dominate? Why did Linux become so successful? Well, in 97, we got our first explanation of this, or our first semi-official explanation. And does anyone recognize this guy? Eric Raymond, well done. And he wrote an essay called The Cathedral and the Bazaar. And he described two models of software development. The Cathedral is a model where the software is released, the code's available, but until the next release, it's only really a kind of small group of developers that work on it and have access to it. Then they make the next release and the code's available again. The Bazaar is when you develop that software on the internet in view of everyone. The Cathedral is how he described the typical GNU model. The Bazaar is how he described the typical Linux model. And he even went on to say that Linus's main innovation was not the Linux kernel. He said it was actually the development model. So think about the ramifications of that statement. I mean, the Linux kernel is pretty important, right? And he's saying the development model he invented is even more important than that. What else happened in 97? Well, I got a job. I got out of university a few years earlier and decided to get a proper job. And I got a job in a bank, and it was a pretty boring job. I basically had two sets of numbers, and I had to reconcile them and call out differences. That was my job. I used Excel to help me out with this. And one day, I noticed this little button in Excel called Record Macro. So I pressed it, I did a load of stuff on the spreadsheet, and I pressed stop, and this stuff appeared in front of my eyes. And I hadn't done programming for a few years now. I spent about 5 years hacking around in the 8-bit world, and I kind of lost interest. And I thought, I know this stuff. I've seen this kind of stuff before. And of course, it was VBA, right? So I started hacking with VBA. I rediscovered my love of hacking. And what did I do? Well, I didn't learn the minimum necessary. I explored the capabilities. And I ended up actually automating my own job. And that was cool. I spent a couple of weeks kind of just knocking back and like pressing a button each day. But in the end, that got quite boring. So I told someone about it, and they said, cool. And then I automated someone else's job, and I'm not sure what happened to them. But and what I've done is I've drawn a graph here of cumulative number of users of my code. And back in 1983, this was kind of me and 2 or 3 friends. I mean, the exact number isn't important, but as you can see, this kind of stayed still because I didn't really do much else. And then when I discovered this wonder of VBA in '97, a few more people started using my code. I'll come back to that a bit more later. 98. So 98 was a huge year in the history of open source. After reading Eric S. Raymond's essay, the top guys at NETSCAPE decided to open source NAVIGATOR. Right? And this is a major internet company open sourcing their flagship product. They looked at how this worked for Linux, and they thought this can work for us. Indirect reaction to that, a group of guys got together and actually coined the term open source. This is the year that the term open source came into being. And it was Eric S. Raymond and a whole load of other guys. Indirect reaction to that, this happened. Has anyone heard of the Halloween documents? Yeah. Okay, Microsoft, not many of you, but Microsoft people, this is a bit of your history. This was a set of internal memos between high-level people at Microsoft. And the reason it's named the Halloween documents is not because it's spooky. Well, it actually is a bit spooky when you read some of it. But Eric S. Raymond released it on Halloween, leaked it out on Halloween. And I'm just going to read an extract for you verbatim, because it's really quite incredible stuff. OSS projects have been able to gain a foothold in many server applications because of the wide utility of simple and highly commoditized protocols. By extending these protocols and developing new protocols, we can deny OSS projects entry into the market. Now think about what's being said there. The protocols are simple and highly commoditized. Let's make them complex and specialized. Let's deny these people entry into the market. So I don't know about you, but that seems incredibly underhand to me. You know, that's not kind of like running the race and trying to be faster than your opponent. That's kind of like tripping them up at the start line. You know, and who's going to benefit from that? You know, we all want simple, commoditized protocols. You know, who doesn't? And if they're not, ultimately the community is going to be harmed. So, of people, I'm sorry for pulling these skeletons out of your cupboard. I know there are a few of you here, Casey and a few others. So please don't take away my MVP. I am going to say nice things about you later, I promise. 99. This is the year that I became a software developer. I was no longer just kind of hacking around automating people's jobs. I actually got a job as a software developer to write software, and I guess I started to automate whole departments' jobs. I'm not sure what happened. But I did that with VB6, ASP, Sybase, so really stepping up in my technologies. And this had quite an effect on this graph. I've now gone from kind of just a handful of users to using my code to the hundreds of users worldwide. It's a pretty big company, and hundreds of users worldwide. All of a sudden, we're executing my code. 2002. So Microsoft did something in 2002. What did they do? What did they release? .NET. .NET's the one I was looking for. XP as well, but .NET is the one I was looking for. Yeah, pretty easy. There was an open source project, .NET open source, which had its first commit in 2002 that I found. Anyone guess what it is? Sorry? I don't think so. I mean, I would like someone to call out the one that I found. You all know it. Not mono. Sorry? Did you? Nant? It wasn't Nant. NUnit.
Oh, you're talking about .NET general ecosystem.
.NET open source project. Yeah, yeah. NUnit. NUnit is the one. You win it. NUnit contrib. Yeah, yeah. So I mean, there was other stuff happening around that time. NU contrib kicked off a lot of stuff. Yeah, absolutely. So it was NU. And you, sir, you win a backpack, by the way. Come and get it from me afterwards. 2006. 2006, Microsoft had done a lot of thinking at this time. And they'd made a lot of good decisions. And I think they realized that open source is not going to go away. Right? Open source is here to stay. And in 2006, they hired this guy, Sam RAMJI. And they made him the head of open source strategy at Microsoft. So they are not trying to kill it anymore. They are embracing it. And it's this guy's job to lead that effort. And one of the first things he did was he created CodePlex.
I want to correct history a little bit here. Do you know what happened before 2006 that was significant prior to CodePlex?
What happened before CodePlex?
Does anybody know? What existed before CodePlex that was created at Microsoft? Patterns and practices team. Got.net.
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 All right.
Precursor to CodePlex.
Okay.
And then CodePlex, but that was more like a fringe thing. And then CodePlex was going official.
All right. I knew I couldn't get away with telling lies of Glenn in the audience. Yeah.
That's not a lie.
All right, 2008. This is the year that I first used open source. This is the first time that I actually reached out to use open source. And there was a reason for that. I had a year off work. I decided to take a year off work this year, and I hacked around with my own projects. And it's the first year that I remember actually reaching out and using open source myself. So I kind of, in a way, again, rediscovered my love of hacking then. And 2011, well, this was the year that Microsoft does OSS. Okay, so going from a company which has actually wanted to kill OSS, they are actually contributing back for the first time as a company officially, and they contributed to Samba. 2012, this is the year that I do OSS. This is the first year that I contributed back to the community. And I did that with a little project called XBehavior. This was actually a proof of concept by Phil Hack and Brad Wilson. And I wasn't content to learn them necessarily. I explored the capabilities, took it in a different direction, and again, rediscovered my love of hacking all over again. And that's continued to this day. I then got involved in FakeItEasy. Does anyone use FakeItEasy here? Glenn does. All right. It's, I guess it's a bit more popular in Europe. I don't know. When I asked this question in Europe, a lot of people put up their hands. But it's a mocking framework, and it's fairly well known. And Patrick Hain, the originator of the framework, put up his hand on Twitter and said, "I don't have time for this anymore. Can someone please take over?" Because he still loved it, he just didn't have time. And I just put up my hand and said, "Yeah, I'll do it." And I didn't qualify to do it. I didn't think he'd actually give me it. But he just turned around and said, "Yeah, you seem like a cool guy. It's yours." Wow. And that was pretty exciting for me. And this had quite an effect on this graph, right? So this is the graph up to, not including 2012. So as you can see, after I got my proper IT job, I kind of stayed in the same company, and a few more people started using my software, but you know, it kind of stayed around the hundreds. Now, the next slide is the same graph with 2012 added on. Right, I'll do that again. So this stuff up here, this stuff here is that stuff down there, right? And the point is, it's gone from the hundreds of users to the tens of thousands. And I base this on NuGet stats, which I know are unreliable, but they can be unreliable but each way. But the point is, again, the exact number's not important. It's gone to the tens of thousands of users. 2014, check this out. You've got the CEO of Microsoft standing up and saying Microsoft loves Linux. And I guess at least he can say that, right? You know, he says, sorry, I had to put one meme in there. I know memes are overused. That's the only one, I promise. But in that year, Microsoft announced .NET on Mac and Linux. I think it was or Connect, I can't remember. They also announced the core framework was going to be open source, only for some idiot in Czechoslovakia to ruin their presentation. They announced that Roslyn is open source, so the language itself is open source now. You can add that next new feature to C#. You can become an MVP via OSS. So again, think back to the Halloween documents. OSS was evil. Now they're rewarding you for it. Right? The company has turned around. And this is the year that I got involved in scriptcs. And this again came completely out of the blue. I contributed a bit and sent a few PRs and raised a few issues. And Glenn actually asked me to hop on Skype one day and he said, do you want to be a member of the team? And I jumped at the chance. And this was really exciting. So thanks again, Glenn, for that. scriptcs is a pretty high-profile project. Ryan's going to be talking about it later. And, well, actually, sorry, thank you to the whole team for that. Philip's here as well. He's going to be talking about Roslyn. And this was the year that I contributed to NuGet. Does anyone know the development dependency feature in NuGet? Anyone heard of that? Yeah, a couple of you are nodding. So that just allows you to declare your package as development dependency, and when you package from that, it won't be a runtime dependency. So I found that very useful. I actually found myself on a conference call with the whole NuGet team in Redmond. You know, me sitting in my bedroom and them sitting in a big conference room, and I pitched this kind of feature to them. So that was pretty exciting. And again, that had a pretty profound effect on this graph. Because now, whenever you install a package via NuGet, you're actually running my code. And there are about 10 million .NET developers in the world, according to VS Stats. And even if only half of them are doing that, you know, the point is it's kind of jumped up to the millions. So there are now millions of people running my code. 2015, okay, the Linux kernel. Where are we with the Linux kernel? Not so much the version, although that is interesting. To rewrite the Linux kernel from scratch, if it did not exist.
It's a couple million lines of code at this point, 2.8
2.8 million lines of code, right? And how much do you think it might cost to rewrite the Linux kernel from scratch? Billions is the answer, and you so are right. There have been 5 separate studies done, and the estimates are that it will cost well in excess of $1 billion to rewrite the Linux kernel. That is incredible. You know, this is tens of thousands of developer years, depending on how much the developer costs. But this is staggering. Linux now comes pre-installed on 50% of devices. This is phones, laptops, tablets, whatever. 50% of devices. Last year, this was closer to 40%. So where's it going to be next year? Where's it going to be in 5 years? Who knows Linux fairly well here? Anyone? Right, a few of you, but not many. I don't know it very well either. Yeah, maybe we should. You know, I think it's pretty relevant. Microsoft, where are they in 2015? Well, the core CLR is open source. So basically, pretty much the whole of the next version of .NET is now open source. The old friends are kind of jumping in and joining the party. MS Build, WCF. Yeah, you know, it's love them or hate them. It's great to have them open source. Open source Windows? It sounds far-fetched, but earlier this year, a senior guy at Microsoft called Mark Russinovich said publicly that one day there could be an open source Windows. I'm very skeptical, but the fact is that that is going through the head of someone at Microsoft, a senior person at Microsoft. I find that quite amazing. Who knows? 2015, where am I? Well, I maintain around 100 NuGet packages. This includes the NuGet packages I look after as part of my job. I've spoken at my first ever conferences. I spoke at .NET Fringe in April. Thanks again, Glenn, for supporting me there. I spoke at the NDC, DEVDAY, and here I am at .NET Unboxed. I became an MVP. I also got a job at Particular Software. Who's heard of Particular Software? A few of you, yeah? So it's Udi Dehaan's company. Actually, NSBCon is in this very building, I believe. I believe it's in this very building in about a month's time. We create things like N-Service Bus and other tooling. And all of that is open source. All the products we produce are open source. So, you know, and now every day is pretty much an open source day for me. So how happy I am about that. And again, the reason that I'm calling this out is not to show off. This is because open source has been my avenue into all of this. Right? There are other ways in, but open source is the reason that I got into all of this. And one last look at this graph. I'm going to stick my neck out and say 80% of .NET developers are probably running my code fairly regularly now, considering all the extra, all the added contributions I'm making now. So if you're a .NET developer and you're not running some of my code fairly regularly, it's probably quite unusual. And it's getting towards this kind of global limit of 10 million developers. And this graph is not very interesting because it's just a big spike. But if you look at it on a logarithmic scale, I apologize, I'm a mathematician. I did maths at university. But logarithm just means that each line is 10 times the line below it. You can kind of see these 3 phases. You can see me initially getting into hacking on my Electron down here. You can see me getting into hacking VBA here, and things jump up. And then things stay fairly flat. And I think this is the case for a lot of people who go into corporate IT jobs. And I just want to point out that this does not mean that the code that I wrote here was not important. I wrote some very important code here. And the number of users running your code is not that important, right? If you've written code which is used by a handful of users and they use it to save people's lives, it's more important than any code I've ever written. But I do think this is an interesting metric. I think it displays something, maybe the potential of my code to reach out and help people. And then finally, we've got the third phase here where I get into open source. I rediscover my love of hacking once again, and a couple of orders of magnitude and kind of hitting this global limit. So it is easy, and I'd like to show you how easy. It's all very well me talking about contributing, but what's it like to actually contribute? Well, let's have a look. So you can contribute nowadays without even leaving your browser. And I was having a look at Shoodly a little bit earlier. And I found to my horror, as you know, I'm obsessed with style cop, that there was a return statement with an extra indentation, right? And I cannot let this go. Right? So I am going to fix this. And the beauty is I do not even have to leave my browser. I can just go and hit edit. And where is it? Where is it? Where is it? It's here. So I can just go in and fix it just like that. Oops. Yeah, I don't want all that stuff in there either. And there's some, I mean, once I get started, there's no stopping me, right? I mean, look at this stuff, right? That's just not right. Come on. I just have to fix this stuff when I see it. And what else have we got? Oh, that shouldn't be there. Right. So fixed white space. So sorry. Just had to do that before continuing with my Keynote at .NET Unboxed. And I can propose a file change. Now, I don't think I've forked Shoodly. I don't think I have, but this will actually fork it for me. So I click this button, it forks the repo. It will actually create a pull request if the internet is still connected. Is it going to let me down right now? I think it is. I'll try once more. No, I don't think it's going to work. Well, had that worked, it would have been that easy. All I do then is I just hit submit pull request and I'm done. All right, I'll do it after the talk so you can benefit from that, Jake. So it really is that easy. And what's the future of OSS? Well, for myself, I want to make more impact. So as I've demonstrated, a lot of people are now running my code, but most people probably didn't even know about it. You know, most people here don't know about the development dependency feature. So I want to make more impact. I've kind of made a spike into the crowd, and I want to kind of widen that and make more impact and help make more people's lives better. And these are simultaneously my hopes and my observations. I think I am doing this. I'm now working for particular software, and we're an open source company. So I am doing that. Microsoft, I hope that Microsoft are becoming more and more OSS. And again, this is happening. This is an observation and a hope. You know, Microsoft are learning. They're fairly new to the OSS game. So, you know, some things are going very well, some things aren't going very well. Some projects are still more on the cathedral end of the spectrum. I hope they come more towards the bazaar end of the spectrum. And again, that is happening. I think the future is very bright there. For the community, I hope there's more adoption. Okay, there's still a lot of barriers to open source adoption. And one of the things I often get asked is, how do I get my company how do I persuade my company to let me use open source and to contribute to it? And these are barriers put up by the consumers or potential contributors. It's not barriers put up by the community itself. It's the potential consumers and contributors. They put up their own barriers. I don't want to see them come down, and they are coming down. A recent study showed that 66% of companies are actually contributing back to open source now. And 66% are also looking at open source solutions before any other. So again, this is happening. And the last thing I want to introduce into the future is you, okay? Because you are the future, or us, we are the future. If you're not already involved in open source, the community needs you, you know? So please do get involved. And how can you get involved? Well, you can contribute. Right? I just showed you how easy it is to contribute, assuming your internet connection works. Right? It's really easy. I'm sure everyone here thinks they're capable of doing what I just did when I fixed that white space. And I just want to point out that no contribution is too small. Right? You don't have to write that new whiz-bang feature. If you fix some white space in one of my projects, I'm going to say thank you very much. You've improved the file, great, you're now a contributor. Answer a call, you know, just like I did with FakeItEasy. Someone shouts out for help, just put up your hand and help out. And throw it out there. I'm sure a lot of people here have got little projects that they think would be great as an open source project, but it's not ready, right? It's never ready. I talk about this more on my blog, a blog post on my site called OSS It Already. So one of my drivers for giving this talk is to persuade people to get involved in open source. And when I look back, you may have noticed a gap between Adam does open source in 2008, Adam uses open source and Adam does open source in 2012. And I think if I'd have heard a talk a bit more like this back then, I would have got involved a little bit earlier. And you know, I've spoken a lot about the things I've done here, but you know, back in 2012, I was just another developer who just started to throw his little project out there. And in 2012, I was just another guy who put up his hand on Twitter and said, yeah, I'll volunteer for FakeItEasy. And at Connect, I was just another guy who spotted a really easy fix and just submitted a PR. And you could have substituted anyone here for me in that situation. You know, it really was very easy stuff to do. And you know, like me, if you get involved, you may never quite get a little car down to 1,000, but who knows? You might just end up on stage at .NET Unboxed giving a keynote. So guys, I really hope you enjoy the conference. I think this is going to be a fantastic 2 days, so do make the most of it. I'm going to put up a slide right after this which gives you 2 free days access to Udi Dehaan's Advanced Distributed Systems Design course, so make a note of it and register before it expires. And for those of you who like to decorate your laptop like me, there's a load of stickers down here and at the front desk, so please feel free to grab them. And I hope to talk to all of you over the next 2 days. It's great to be up here talking to you, but it's even better to speak to everyone in person. So guys, enjoy yourselves, enjoy .NET Unboxed, and thank you very much for listening.